Excavation teams breached the alien ship's main chamber on June 19, 2026, expecting to find technology or remains, but instead discovered a museum, a perfectly preserved exhibition hall containing artifacts from Earth, thousands of items from every era of human history, from prehistoric tools to smartphones, all arranged chronologically in display cases with plaques written in English. I was third through the airlock, behind Vinny DeSoto and Jamal Okafor. The smell hit us, old libraries mixed with ozone. My visor fogged from how hard I was breathing. 9 months drilling through Martian regolith to reach this thing, and now we stood in a corridor that shouldn't exist, under lighting with no visible source. "Theo, you seeing this?" Vinny's voice crackled. Display cases lined both walls, stretching far into darkness. Stone axe with a wooden handle. Homo heidelbergensis, Germany, 400,000 BCE. Bronze figurines with detailed faces, Mesopotamia, 3,200 BCE. Pottery, coins from a dozen empires. A musket, each artifact perfectly preserved, impossibly authentic. My training at Caltech never prepared me for this. I specialized in geological dating, spent 5 years studying Martian rock formations from Pasadena before volunteering for this mission. The ship's outer hull had tested at 1.2 million years old. Inside, these objects looked placed yesterday. "Keep moving," Mission Control said in my ear, Lawrence Haddock, our director back in Houston. "Document everything you see." We walked past centuries, a pocket watch, a telegraph, a transistor radio. The chronology never broke. Then Jamal stopped so suddenly I nearly walked into him. "That's a smartphone," he said. The case showed an iPhone, cracked screen, still in its protective case. The plaque read, North America, 2031. 5 years from now. "Equipment malfunction," Vinny said, but his voice had lost its certainty. "Translation error in the—" "Next case," I interrupted. A newspaper, the New York Times, perfectly preserved behind glass. The date, March 7th, 2045. The headline, "Third Nuclear Exchange Confirmed. Moscow, Beijing, Delhi, respond to..." The rest was folded under. Jamal's breathing got ragged. "How is this possible?" We moved faster then, almost running past the cases. A virtual reality headset from 2038. A water filtration device from 2049. A child's stuffed animal from 2050, worn and loved, one button eye missing. The final case stopped us cold. A child's drawing, crayon on paper, 2052. Earth split perfectly in half like an egg. Something massive emerging from the core, drawn in frantic black scribble. No face, no features, just wrong geometry that hurt to process even as a child's sketch. The plaque beneath the drawing had one word, harvest. "Brant," Haddock's voice cut through the static. "We're reading a power surge in your section. Get out, now." But Vinny had found the database terminal, its screen flickering to life in his gloved hands, and the translation was already scrolling across our helmet displays, and I couldn't look away from those final words. Subject species terminated. Timeline ends here. Behind us, something in the museum began to wake up. The power surge never came. Whatever Haddock's instruments detected back in Houston, it didn't manifest as sparks or explosions or anything we could measure. Instead, the museum's lighting shifted, subtle, like someone adjusting a dimmer switch in another room, testing to see if we'd noticed the change. "False alarm," Haddock said after a long, tense minute. "Probably interference from the ship's residual systems. Continue documentation." Vinny was still hunched over the database terminal, his gloved fingers moving awkwardly across the alien interface. The screen cycled through languages I didn't recognize before settling on English. Not translated English, actual English, complete with idiomatic phrases and contractions. "This isn't right," Vinny muttered. He'd been the first to volunteer for Mars, back when the mission was just orbital surveys. Used to work satellite calibration for SpaceX before NASA recruited him. "The linguistic patterns are too perfect. Translation matrices don't work like this." Jamal had moved deeper into the museum, his helmet lamp cutting through the darkness. He stopped at a display case I'd missed in our initial rush, a section labelled personal effects, early 21st century. Inside were wallets, keys, wedding rings, ordinary objects that millions of people owned, but these had names on them. "Theo," Jamal's voice was quiet. "Come look at this." I walked over, my boots making no sound on the floor. That bothered me more than it should have. The acoustics were wrong for a space this size. Every museum I'd ever visited had echoes. The wallet in the case belonged to someone named Michael Torrens. New York driver's license, credit cards, a photo of 2 kids. The plaque beneath read, "Recovered 2034, Lower Manhattan." "That's 9 years from now," Jamal said. He was from Brooklyn originally, joined NASA's geology program the same year I did. We'd spent 6 months in Arizona training for Martian conditions, learning to identify mineral compositions through glove-thick layers. How did they get this? I didn't answer because I was looking at the next case, a keychain with a University of Colorado logo. The plaque, "Recovered 2037, Boulder." Then a smartphone with a cracked screen protector, "Recovered 2039, Seattle." Each item came with coordinates, latitude and longitude, specific addresses that wouldn't exist until years from now, attached to objects that people hadn't lost yet. "Vinny, what does the database say about collection methodology?" I asked. He was quiet for a moment, scrolling through information that made his breathing change pattern. "It's calling them temporal extraction points. Says they used something called resonance anchoring to pull objects forward from their decay moments. The technical specs don't translate cleanly, but it's like they were fishing in time, grabbing things right before they were destroyed or lost forever." "That's impossible," Jamal said, but without conviction. "So is this entire ship," I replied. The museum stretched farther than our preliminary scans had suggested. We'd mapped the exterior using ground-penetrating radar, estimated maybe 2,000 square meters of interior space. But as we walked, I counted at least 4,000 square meters already, and we hadn't reached the end. "Space isn't fixed inside the ship," Vinny said, like he was commenting on the weather. "The hull's internal geometry doesn't match its external dimensions. That's in the database too. Something about folded space architecture." I tried to focus on the documentation process. We had protocol for this: photo every case, log every plaque, maintain detailed records, but my hands kept shaking. Not from fear exactly, from something adjacent to it. The next section contained newspapers, hundreds of them from dozens of cities arranged by date. I stopped at one from Phoenix, the Arizona Republic, August 15th, 2029. The headline read, "Water Crisis Enters Year 4. Colorado River officially declared depleted." My parents still lived in Phoenix. My brother taught high school there. The article mentioned his school by name in the 3rd paragraph, describing how they'd implemented emergency water rations for students. "Don't read them," Jamal said. He'd noticed me staring. "Whatever's in there, it hasn't happened yet. Maybe it won't." "The collection ends in 2053, Vinny called from the terminal. "Every case after that year is empty, just blank plaques with dates. 2054, 2055, 2056. The database says monitoring ceased due to..." He paused. "Due to completion of observation protocol." "What does that mean?" "It lists humanity as a closed study. Status, terminated. There's a timestamp." His voice got smaller. "March 3rd, 2053, 1447 Universal Time." I looked back at the child's drawing, still visible in its case. That frantic black scribble emerging from Earth's split core. Something about the proportions bothered me. The thing was too large for the planet, like it had been compressed to fit inside. "Who drew that?" I asked. Vinny checked the database. "Artist listed as unknown. Found in rubble, northern Canada. Recovered from timeline position 2052.3, which means..." "March," Jamal finished. "About a year before the end." The museum's lighting shifted again, brightening incrementally. In the new illumination, I saw what we'd missed before. There were cameras. Small, nearly invisible, mounted in the ceiling every few meters. Active cameras with tiny red indicators that pulsed like heartbeats. They're still recording, I said. Vinny looked up from the terminal, his face visible through his visor for the first time since we'd entered. He looked sick. The database has a live feed section, current observations. Theo is pointing at Earth right now, at multiple locations. Show me. He turned the screen. Satellite imagery, but not from any satellite I recognized. The clarity was impossible. I could see individual people on the streets of Tokyo, Mexico City, London. Timestamps in the corner, all current, all accurate. They're still watching us, Jamal whispered. That's when I noticed the newest display case, the one that definitely hadn't been there before. It sat separate from the others, spotlit despite the distance. The plaque read, Recovered 2026 Jezero Crater Mars. Inside was a helmet, pristine, standard NASA issue. The name stenciled on the side, Brandt. It was mine. I couldn't move, couldn't breathe properly. The helmet sat there behind glass, my name in block letters, the scratches on the visor identical to the ones I'd put there myself during training in Arizona. Someone had even captured the small crack near the seal ring where I'd dropped it getting out of the rover 3 days ago. Every detail perfect, every imperfection preserved. That's not possible, I said, but my voice sounded wrong in my own ears. Vinny was already accessing the database, his fingers moving faster now that he'd figured out the interface. It says recovered today, June 19th, 2026, Jezero Crater, extraction time. He stopped. What time? Jamal asked. 1400 hours. That's 2 hours from now. I checked my suit's chronometer. 11:57. We'd been inside the ship for 43 minutes. Extraction methodology listed as Type C event capture, Vinny continued reading. That's different from the others. The database categorizes it as, hold on. It's calling it a preservation sequence. Says the subject was compromised during initial contact protocol and required immediate archival to prevent timeline contamination. Compromised how? I asked, though part of me already knew I didn't want the answer. Vinny didn't respond. He was scrolling through screens of technical data that looked more like poetry than science. Descriptions of temporal mechanics that used words I recognized, but in combinations that made no sense. Phrases like retrocausal entanglement and observer-dependent decay functions filled the display. We need to leave, Jamal said. Right now, if something happens to Theo in 2 hours. Then it's already happened, I interrupted. Don't you get it? That helmet being here means I don't make it out. The timeline's already written. That's deterministic crap and you know it, Jamal shot back. He'd minored in philosophy at Cornell, used to argue about free will during our training exercises. We can still choose differently. But I was looking at the other cases now, the ones surrounding mine, arranged in a neat row like tombstones in a cemetery. A rover wheel with NASA markings, twisted and scorched beyond recognition. The plaque. Recovered 2026, Jezero Crater. Mission failure site. Next to it, a fragment of pressure suit material, torn and melted at the edges, designation number matching our mission patch. Then, a tablet computer I recognized immediately because Vinny had customized it himself. Added stickers from some band I'd never heard of, covered the back with crude drawings in permanent marker. Guys, I said quietly, look at what else they collected today. The silence stretched. Vinny found his tablet's case in the database before I did. It says my extraction is scheduled for 13:35. Respiratory system failure during evacuation attempt. Jamal's case was there too, his NASA issue multi-tool, the one his husband had engraved with their anniversary date. Extraction time, 13:42. Cause, cranial trauma from structural collapse. This is psychological warfare, Jamal said, but his voice had lost its certainty. They're trying to manipulate us. Make us panic. Or they're just documenting what happens, I said, like scientists observing bacteria. Vinny had gone back to scrolling through the database, searching for something I couldn't identify. His breathing had changed, shorter, faster. There's a section here about observation ethics, translated pretty cleanly. It talks about the importance of non-interference, maintaining timeline integrity, minimizing observer effect. They watched humanity for 1 million years and never made contact because... He paused, reading ahead. Because first contact introduces temporal instability, makes prediction models unreliable. But we found their ship, I said. That's contact. That's the instability they're talking about. No, Vinny said slowly. This was deliberate. The ship wanted to be found. It says here that they buried it exactly 900,000 years ago in a geological formation that would survive until humans developed Mars exploration capability. The depth, the location, even the magnetic anomaly we detected, all calculated to ensure discovery at this exact moment in our timeline. Why? Because their monitoring ended in 2053, Jamal said. He'd figured it out before I did. They needed someone to know, to have the information before everything ends. Vinny found a new section of the database, and his sharp intake of breath made both of us turn. There's video footage, recorded from the future, the harvest event. Don't, I started to say, but he'd already pulled it up on the screen. The image quality was perfect, shot from multiple angles simultaneously in a way that suggested orbital platforms positioned all around the planet. Date stamp, March 3rd, 2053, 1447 Universal Time. Location, global. No audio, just pure visual documentation of something that shouldn't be possible. Earth hung in the black, blue and white and beautiful. Cloud patterns swirled over the Pacific. City lights dotted the night side. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the planet's rotation stopped. Just ceased mid-spin like someone had pressed pause on reality itself. The oceans didn't slosh or surge. They simply froze in place, held by forces I couldn't begin to comprehend. The crack started at the North Pole, a line of absolute darkness that split the planet like an egg. It travelled south in complete silence. Of course there was silence. We were watching from space, and as the hemispheres separated, something emerged from Earth's core. Not from the core exactly. Through it. Like the planet had been built around this thing, or like the thing had been waiting inside all along, compressed into impossible density. I can't describe its shape because it didn't have one, not in any way that made sense or could be processed by a human brain. It was large enough to dwarf continents, but also somehow distant, like I was seeing it through the wrong end of a telescope or through dimensions my eyes weren't built to perceive. The child's drawing had captured it better than any photograph could. Just frantic black scribbles that suggested geometry without depicting it, horror without form. The video lasted 17 seconds. When it ended, Earth was gone, not destroyed, consumed, absorbed. The thing that had emerged simply expanded, filling the space where the planet used to be, and then the footage cut out. "Hell," Jamal whispered. It was the first time I'd heard him curse in 3 years of working together, training together, travelling millions of miles to stand here together. I found I'd been holding my breath without realising it. "How long do we have?" 27 years, Vinny said. "Unless we can change it." "We can't," I said. "That's the point. They collected all these artifacts from the future because the future already happened from their perspective. Time isn't a line we're moving along. It's a structure we're trapped inside." "Then why show us?" Jamal demanded. "Why bury this ship where we'd find it if there's nothing we can do?" I looked at my helmet again, sitting in its case, waiting to be collected in 2 hours. The museum stretched on into darkness ahead of us, thousands more cases holding thousands more artifacts from a future that had already been written. But there were those empty cases too, the ones labelled with years after 2053, waiting for items that would never be placed. "Maybe that's exactly why," I said. "Maybe we're supposed to find this. Maybe seeing our own deaths is part of what makes them happen." Vinny had found something else in the database, another section buried in technical specifications. "There's a defense protocol listed here, emergency measures the ship can take if its monitoring objectives are threatened. It includes targeted intervention for timeline preservation, which apparently means..." He went quiet. "Means what?" Jamal pressed. "Means making sure certain events happen exactly as observed. It can manipulate local causality within a limited radius, push probability in specific directions, The ship isn't just watching anymore, it's ensuring the timeline stays intact. I understood then why the lighting had changed when we entered, why the power surge never manifested, why we'd found exactly what we were meant to find, in exactly the sequence that would lead us deeper into the museum. The ship was guiding us, herding us toward whatever extraction events were scheduled in the next 2 hours. "We're already dead," I said. "We just haven't caught up to it yet." That's when the museum's lighting brightened again, illuminating a new section we hadn't noticed in the darkness before. A doorway, previously dark, now clearly visible and waiting. Above it, a sign in English that shouldn't exist. "Active observation chamber, authorized personnel only." "That wasn't there before," Jamal said, but I knew better. It had always been there. We just weren't meant to see it until now, until we'd learned enough to understand what we were about to witness. From somewhere deep in the ship, something mechanical hummed to life. A sound like enormous gears turning, or like time itself being wound backward, reset. The museum wanted to show us something else. And we had 1 hour and 58 minutes remaining before my helmet was collected. The doorway led down. Not stairs exactly, but a slope that shifted angle as we descended. The walls weren't metal or stone. They had a texture somewhere between ceramic and living tissue. "This feels wrong," Jamal said. "We should head back to the rover. Contact Houston, get extraction protocols running." "And tell them what?" I asked. "That we found our own corpses before we died. They'd scrub the mission, classify everything." "Maybe that's the right call," Jamal countered. But Vinny was already halfway down the slope, drawn by something none of us had articulated. The database terminal had changed him. He'd seen too much technical data, absorbed too many impossible specifications. His movements had become mechanical, precise, like he was following instructions only he could hear. "The observation chamber monitors real-time events," Vinny said without turning. "Active timelines. It's how they track extraction targets. If we want to understand what's going to happen to us, the answers are down here." I followed because the alternative was standing alone in a museum of future corpses, and Jamal followed because neither of us wanted to split up. The slope ended at a circular chamber maybe 20 meters across. The walls were covered in screens, hundreds of them, each showing a different location on Earth. Times Square, Tokyo subway, a beach in Australia. But others showed places that looked wrong, buildings that didn't match current architecture. These weren't current feeds. They were showing Earth at different points along its timeline. At the chamber's center stood a sphere about 2 meters in diameter, suspended in mid-air. Its surface rippled like liquid mercury. As we approached, our faces appeared distorted. My reflection older, Jamal's younger, Vinny's not at all. "It's a probability engine," Vinny said, walking straight up to touch it. His hand passed through the surface and the entire chamber shuddered. The screens flickered, their timelines jumping forward and backward in rapid succession. "Don't touch the alien equipment," Jamal snapped, but it was too late. The screen stabilized, all of them showing the same location. Jezero Crater. The rover. Our base camp. The timestamp read 1300 hours, 1 hour from now. The feed showed our rover's exterior camera, the kind of boring maintenance footage that got recorded automatically. Then the ground split open, not an earthquake. The Martian surface was being unzipped from below. A crack appeared 10 meters from the rover, perfectly straight, impossibly precise. It spread in both directions, forming a circle around our camp. The edges began to glow with a light that had no color. Something emerged. Tendrils maybe, or appendages, I couldn't tell. They wrapped around the rover and the metal began to fold. Not bend or crush. Fold, like origami. Within seconds, the rover had been compressed into a cube about the size of a briefcase. The timestamp advanced, 1335. A pressure suit appeared in frame, running from the direction of the ship. Vinny's suit, with his custom stickers, visible even through the camera's resolution. He made it 3 steps before the ground beneath him liquefied. Not melted, liquefied like reality itself had lost cohesion in that spot. I watched Vinny sink, watched him claw at nothing, watched the Martian surface close over him like water. "Respiratory system failure," the real Vinny said beside me. But there was no dust. The ground just ate me. The timestamp continued, 1342. Another suit, running from a different direction. Jamal's. He was carrying something, trying to salvage equipment. The ship had begun to tilt, sinking into the crater wall. A section of hull broke free and fell directly onto Jamal. The impact was instant, final. "No," Jamal whispered. "I wouldn't run back toward the ship." "You were going for the emergency shelter," I said. "The hull just broke free at exactly the wrong moment. Or the right moment, depending on whether the ship was passively observing or actively ensuring outcomes." The timestamp advanced to 1400 hours. My turn. The feed showed me exiting through the main airlock. My movements were frantic, panicked. I made it 20 meters before I stopped. Just froze, facing something the camera couldn't see. Then I started walking backward, not running, walking carefully. My suit's external speakers must have been on. "I understand," my future self said. "I won't resist. Just don't hurt them." The next part happened too fast. One moment I was standing there. The next, my helmet was gone. Not removed. Gone. Edited out of reality. The Martian atmosphere hit instantly. I had maybe 15 seconds before hypoxia did its work. I watched myself die. Watched something like a shadow reach down and delicately retrieve my helmet, carrying it back toward the ship. The screens went dark. "We have to leave," Jamal said. "Right now. Get back to the rover before any of that starts." "You can't change it," Vinny said, his hand still in the sphere. "The ship isn't predicting the future. It's ensuring it. Every decision we make has already been accounted for." "That's garbage," Jamal started, but Vinny cut him off. "It's mathematics. The sphere is showing me the equations. We found the ship because we were always going to find it. We'll die because we were always going to die." I looked at the sphere, at the probability calculations rippling across its surface in languages I couldn't read. What if we destroy it? What if we destroy the ship? "Then we still die," Vinny said simply, "but faster. The ship has defense protocols. I saw them in the database. Any attempt to damage core systems results in immediate sterilization of the threat. It would kill us before we could even activate a charge." The chamber's temperature had dropped. I could see frost forming on the edges of the screens, creeping inward like ice crystals growing in accelerated time. The sphere's surface rippled faster, showing images that hurt to look at directly. Not because they were bright, but because they existed in too many dimensions simultaneously. "There has to be a choice," I said. "Some variable the ship hasn't accounted for. Otherwise, why show us? Why let us see our own deaths?" Vinny finally pulled his hand from the sphere. When he did, I saw that his glove had aged. The material was cracked and brittle, like it had spent years exposed to radiation. "Because our knowledge is part of the equation," he said. "Our awareness of the timeline is what makes it stable. Observers collapsing probability into certainty. We had to see this. It's why we came down here. It's why the chamber door only appeared after we'd learned enough." Jamal grabbed Vinny's shoulder hard enough that I heard the suit material creak. "So what? We just accept it? Walk out there and let ourselves be killed?" "Or we stay here," Vinny said. "Don't go back to the surface. Starve in this museum. At least then the ship doesn't get its timeline." "The ship has contingencies for that too," I said, because I'd figured it out. The defense protocols Vinny mentioned, the way the museum had guided us deeper. "If we don't leave, it'll force us to leave. One way or another." As if responding to my words, the chamber began to seal. The entrance we'd come through flowed shut like water freezing, the not-quite metal surface smoothing over until there was no indication a doorway had ever existed. "Oxygen," Jamal said, checking his suit readout. "We've got maybe 3 hours of air, less if we panic." I looked at the screens, now showing random feeds again. Earth in all its mundane beauty. People going to work, eating dinner, living lives that would end in 27 years. None of them knew. None of them could know because the ship had buried itself 900,000 years ago to ensure the timeline remained stable. "There's another way," I said quietly. "The database. Vinny, can you access it from here?" He touched the sphere again, and information cascaded across his helmet's heads-up display. "What are you looking for?" "Timeline preservation protocols. You said the ship ensures certain events happen, but to do that, it must have limits, boundaries it can't cross. Find them." Vinny worked in silence for several minutes while Jamal and I watched the screens. The frost had spread to cover half the chamber now, and my suit was reporting external temperatures dropping below -40 degrees Celsius. The ship was forcing our hand, making the chamber uninhabitable, so we'd have to leave, have to return to the surface, have to fulfill our roles in the predetermined timeline. "Found something," Vinny said finally. "The ship's observation ethics. It can't directly harm pre-extinction species, can't make first contact, can't reveal itself before the species reaches sufficient technological development. Everything it does has to appear natural, coincidental. It manipulates probability, but it can't violate causality." "What does that mean for us?" Jamal asked. I already knew. "It means the ship can't kill us directly. It has to arrange circumstances, create situations where our deaths appear accidental, natural consequences of exploring an alien vessel." "So we don't give it circumstances," Jamal said, understanding dawning. "We control the variables." The chamber had become impossibly cold. My suit's heating elements were running at maximum capacity. We had minutes before hypothermia became a factor. "We go back up," I said, "but we don't go to the rover. We don't split up. We stay together and we wait out the timeline. If we're not where we're supposed to be when the ship expects us, maybe we break the equation. Or," Vinny said quietly, "we give it something it can't predict." He pulled his hand from the sphere one final time. The glove disintegrated completely, exposing his bare hand to the Martian cold air inside the chamber. Frost formed instantly on his skin, but he didn't seem to notice. "The ship expects us to try to survive," he said. "That's the foundation of all its calculations, self-preservation. But what if one of us chooses something else?" I realized what he meant to do a second too late. Vinny reached for his helmet seals. "Don't," I shouted, but Jamal was faster. He grabbed Vinny's arms, wrestled him away from the sphere. They struggled for maybe 5 seconds before Vinny went limp, unconscious from hypothermia and whatever effect the sphere had on his exposed skin. "Help me get him up," Jamal said. "We're not losing anyone else." "Not like this." Together we dragged Vinny toward where the entrance had been. The wall remained smooth, sealed, but as we approached, it began to open again, the material flowing apart like the ship had decided we'd learned enough. We had 1 hour and 17 minutes before my helmet would be collected, and Vinny's exposed hand had turned completely black. We dragged Vinny back up the slope, his body limp between us, dead weight in the Martian gravity. The blackened hand had spread to his wrist, the discoloration creeping up his forearm like frostbite in reverse, like something alive crawling beneath his skin. When we got him to the main museum level, Jamal immediately started first aid protocols, cutting away the damaged glove material with careful precision. "It's not cold damage," Jamal said, examining the blackened skin with his helmet light. "It's not hot either. The tissue isn't dead, it's changed. Like it's been exposed to something that doesn't exist yet. Or something that stopped existing 1,000,000 years ago," I said. Vinny's eyes fluttered open. For a moment, they didn't focus on anything in particular, staring through us at something only he could see. Then awareness returned, sharp and sudden. "We have 1 hour and 9 minutes, he said. "I saw the countdown in the sphere. It's not just tracking our deaths, it's coordinating them." "Coordinating with what?" Jamal asked. "With the harvest." Vinny sat up, cradling his blackened hand. "That's what the ship calls it. The harvest isn't an invasion. It's not even hostile. It's collection. The same thing they've been doing to Earth for 1,000,000 years, but on a planetary scale. Taking samples, preserving them, archiving human civilization before it ends." I thought about the museum, the thousands of artifacts stretching back through history. They've been stealing from us the entire time we existed. "Not stealing," Vinny corrected. "Saving. Every object they took was doomed anyway. Lost, destroyed, forgotten. They're taking things at the moment of their natural decay and preserving them, like archaeologists excavating ruins, except they're doing it before the ruins even fall. That doesn't explain why they buried the ship here, Jamal said. Why let us find it? Vinny's expression changed. The data he'd absorbed from the sphere was still processing, organizing itself in his mind. Because we're not the threat they're worried about. We're the solution to a different problem. What problem? I asked. The harvest in 2053 fails. Vinny stood, testing his balance. The sphere showed me probability branches. Multiple timelines. In most of them, the harvest proceeds as planned. Earth ends, humanity is archived, the collectors move on to their next observation target. But in a small percentage of timelines, something goes wrong. The harvest entity encounters resistance it doesn't expect. Human consciousness proves more resilient than predicted. The collection becomes corrupted. Corrupted how? The archived humans don't stay archived. They maintain coherence across the temporal extraction process. They become aware of what's being done to them, and awareness creates instability in the collection matrix. The ship's entire museum becomes contaminated with human consciousness, refusing to accept its own preservation. I looked at the display cases surrounding us, thousands of human artifacts, each one collected from a future that hadn't happened yet from our perspective. You're saying the objects are haunted? I'm saying the objects remember. And if the extraction process goes wrong in 2053, every artifact they've ever collected becomes a vector for human resistance to spread backward through time. The ship itself becomes compromised. Jamal's face had gone pale inside his helmet. That's why they want us to know. We're supposed to prevent the resistance, ensure the harvest goes smoothly. No, I said, the pieces falling into place. We're supposed to die here, today, so we can't warn anyone. The ship showed us the future to ensure we're in exactly the right psychological state when the extraction happens. We needed to see ourselves die so we'd act in ways that make those deaths inevitable. Vinny nodded slowly. The database wasn't giving me information. It was programming me. Every technical detail I absorbed, every temporal equation, it's all designed to make me complicit, to make me accept the timeline as fixed. But you said it yourself, Jamal argued. The timeline is fixed. The artifacts prove it. The artifacts prove one timeline, I said. But Vinny mentioned probability branches, multiple possible futures. What if the one we saw isn't the only option? Vinny held up his blackened hand, the fingers twitching with involuntary movements. This is what happens when you touch probability directly, when you interact with all timelines at once. The sphere doesn't just show the future, it exists in all timelines simultaneously. My hand is black because in some timelines it was destroyed, in others it was preserved. The sphere averaged those outcomes and this is the result. So if we could access the sphere again, interact with it properly, we could shift which timeline becomes real, Vinny finished. Change which probability branch we're on. But we'd need to make a change significant enough that the ship's calculations can't compensate for it. Like what? Jamal asked. Before anyone could answer, the museum's lighting changed again. Not dimming or brightening, but shifting in color. From the neutral white we'd gotten used to something with a faint reddish tint. And I realized what I was seeing. That's Martian sunlight, I said. Natural light from outside. Impossible. We were deep underground, surrounded by meters of rock and alien hull material. But the light was unmistakable, carrying the distinctive wavelength pattern of sunlight filtered through Mars' thin atmosphere. The ship is opening, Vinny said, creating vents to the surface, preparing for the extraction events. I checked my chronometer, 53 minutes until my helmet would be collected. The ground beneath us had begun to vibrate, a low frequency that I felt more than heard. Through the soles of my boots, I could sense massive machinery activating deep within the ship's structure. The observation chamber, I said suddenly. The sphere. You said it exists in all timelines simultaneously. What if we don't just touch it? What if we break it? Force it to collapse into a single state? That would destabilize the entire ship, Vinny said. Temporal paradoxes cascading through every artifact they've collected. It might destroy the museum, but it would also kill us instantly, Jamal finished. Defense protocols, sterilization of threats. Maybe that's the point, I said. If we die destroying the sphere instead of dying the way the ship expects, we break the timeline. Our helmets can't be collected if we're atomized. The artifacts can't exist if we die differently than predicted. Vinny's blackened hand twitched, fingers curling involuntarily. There's another option. The sphere showed me something else. A conservation protocol. If the ship determines its primary mission is compromised, it has an emergency measure. It can reverse the harvest. Reverse it how? Jamal asked. By returning everything. Every artifact, every object it ever collected, sent back to its exact moment of extraction. Undoing 1,000,000 years of observation in a single temporal cascade. But the ship would never activate that protocol unless it believed the alternative was total mission failure. I understood then what we had to do. We make it believe. We get back to the observation chamber, we interact with the sphere properly this time, and we show the ship what happens if the harvest proceeds. We show it the corrupted timeline where human consciousness spreads through the collection. That timeline might not exist, Jamal said. It might just be a probability, not a certainty. Then we make it certain, I said. We become the contamination. We die touching the sphere, ensuring our consciousness gets archived in a way that corrupts the entire system. The vibration beneath our feet had intensified. I could hear structures shifting in the distance, metal groaning, the sound of the ship reconfiguring itself for the coming extractions. We had less than an hour before everything became inevitable. That's sacrifice, Vinny said quietly. Guaranteed death in exchange for a possibility that we might prevent the 2053 harvest. We're already dead, I reminded him. We saw it happen. The only choice is how we die and what it means. Jamal looked at both of us, his multi-tool still clipped to his belt, the same tool that would be collected from his body in 40 minutes. You're talking about contaminating ourselves on purpose, becoming weapons against the ship. I'm talking about fighting back, I said. They've been taking from humanity for 1,000,000 years. Every lost item, every forgotten artifact. They watch us, study us, collect us, and then they just let Earth end. They have the technology to save us, but they choose not to because their ethics prohibit interference. So we interfere with them, Vinny said. We make ourselves toxic to their entire operation. The reddish light had grown brighter. Somewhere above us, the Martian surface was breaking open, the ship preparing to emerge partially, creating the circumstances that would lead to our predicted deaths. But we weren't going to the surface. We were going back down to the observation chamber. We were going to corrupt the sphere and break their timeline. And we had 51 minutes to do it before the timeline became fixed forever. The descent this time felt different, wrong in ways I couldn't articulate. The slope seemed steeper, the walls closer, pressing in like the throat of some massive creature. The ship was constricting around us, responding to our intentions, our plan to contaminate its precious collection. Vinny led the way despite his ruined hand, which had turned from black to a strange, iridescent color that shifted in the alien lighting, navigating by instinct or maybe by something the sphere had implanted in his mind during that first contact. The chamber will resist us, he said as we walked. It knows what we're trying to do. The ship's consciousness, if you can call it that, pervades every structure. It learns, adapts. Can it stop us? Jamal asked. It can try. The observation chamber's entrance sealed as we approached, the not-quite metal surface flowing together like water freezing. But Vinny pressed his blackened hand against it, and something remarkable happened. The discolored tissue began to glow with that same impossible light we'd seen in the probability sphere. The door recognized him now, recognized the temporal corruption spreading through his cells, and it opened. Inside, the chamber had changed dramatically, transformed into something both familiar and alien. The screens still covered the walls from floor to ceiling, but they all showed the same image now. Us, descending into the chamber, an infinite recursion of the moment we were currently living, each screen showing the scene from a slightly different angle, creating a dizzying kaleidoscope effect. The probability sphere hung at the center as before, but it had grown larger, or maybe we'd gotten smaller, or perhaps both things were happening simultaneously. Perspective felt negotiable here, malleable. It's showing us all the timelines where we attempt this, Vinny said, pointing at the screens. Thousands of them. In most, we fail. The ship's defenses activate before we can contaminate the sphere. In some, we die immediately. In others, we manage to touch it, but the corruption doesn't spread fast enough. And in the rest? I asked. In the rest, we succeed in ways the ship can't predict. Those are the timelines it's trying to prevent. Jamal had moved to examine the screens more closely. These aren't just showing us. Look, that one shows Earth, and is that Mars from orbit? He was right. Scattered among the recursive images of us were views of both planets, shown from angles that suggested they were being observed simultaneously, right now, by something with an impossible vantage point. I saw the rover on Mars's surface exactly as the vision had shown us, the ground beginning to crack around it. It's starting, I said, the extraction sequence. 37 minutes early, Vinny confirmed, checking his chronometer. The ship is adapting, accelerating the timeline to ensure we don't interfere. On the screens, I watched the rover fold, watched the ground liquefy in preparation for Vinny's extraction. The sequence was happening faster than predicted, but it was still following the same pattern. The ship was rushing to fulfill its predetermined events before we could corrupt them. We need to move now, Jamal said. But Vinny held up his hand, stopping us. Wait. Look at the sphere. The probability engine's surface had stopped rippling. It had gone perfectly still, smooth as glass, and in its reflection, I saw something. The sphere was showing us the moment of contact, all three of us reaching out to touch it simultaneously. But in the reflection, our suits were different, older, damaged in ways that suggested years of wear rather than hours. That's not now, I said. That's showing us from when? From after, Vinny said quietly. From a timeline where we've been trapped in this chamber for years, trying over and over to corrupt the sphere, failing each time, with the ship resetting us like lab rats in a maze. That's not possible, Jamal said, but his voice wavered. Time isn't linear here. The ship can loop us, trap us in a causal cycle where we think we're attempting this for the first time, but we've actually been trying for decades. Our memories reset each iteration, but our bodies accumulate the damage. I looked at my reflection in the sphere, at the older, worn version of myself, at the exhaustion carved into features I didn't recognize. How many times have we done this? I don't know, but we need to break the pattern. Do something different than every previous iteration. The chamber's temperature had begun to drop again, frost forming on the screens. The ship's defense protocols activating, but slower this time, like it was uncertain. On the walls, the images shifted. I saw myself on Earth, years ago standing in my parents' kitchen in Phoenix. Saw Jamal at his wedding, his husband smiling. Saw Vinny as a kid, maybe 10 years old, staring up at the night sky. It's accessing our memories, Jamal said, trying to find leverage. Something to stop us. But the memories kept coming, flooding the screens. My first day at Caltech, Jamal's first published paper, Vinny fixing his first car engine. Ordinary moments from ordinary lives, preserved with the same meticulous care as all the other artifacts in the museum. It's not trying to stop us, I realized. It's trying to save us, adding us to the collection before we can corrupt it. The screens began showing futures now. Me, older, teaching geology at a university I didn't recognize. Jamal with grey hair, holding grandchildren. Vinny accepting some kind of award, his hand fully healed. These weren't predictions, they were offerings, timelines where we survived, where we went home, where we lived full lives. It's negotiating, Vinny said. The ship wants to preserve us properly. Let us live out our natural timelines, then collect us at the moment of death, like it does with everything else. It's giving us a choice. Become part of the collection willingly or be destroyed trying to resist. Those futures aren't real, Jamal said. They could be. The ship has the power to make them real. It can extract us right now, send us back to Earth, and none of this will have happened. We'd remember it as a dream, maybe, a shared hallucination brought on by equipment malfunction. On the screens, I watched myself grow old. Watched a life I'd never live but could feel the weight of, the accumulated years pressing down like gravity. The ship was offering salvation, safety, a return to normal causality where death came naturally instead of a scheduled extraction. "Theo," Jamal said quietly, "I have a husband, a life. If there's a chance." "There's no chance," I interrupted. "Those timelines are bait. The ship is showing us what we want to see, but it's already collecting us. Look at your hands." Jamal looked down. His gloves had started to fade, becoming translucent, like they were being gradually erased from reality. The same was happening to my suit, to Vinny's. We were being extracted not violently but gently, dissolved into the collection one molecule at a time. "It's already started," Vinny said, his voice calm. "The ship is archiving us right now, offering pleasant visions while it completes the process. In a few minutes, we'll be artifacts. Perfectly preserved consciousnesses trapped in temporal stasis, experiencing those futures in perpetual loop while our physical forms decay." The frost had covered half the chamber. My fingers were going numb, but not from cold, from absence. From the slow process of ceasing to exist in the present moment and being filed away into the museum's collection. "The sphere," I said, forcing my legs to move. "We touch it now, or we never do." But walking had become difficult. Each step felt like moving through water, through years, through accumulated time pressing down from directions that didn't exist. Vinny was closer to the sphere than Jamal or I, his blackened hand already reaching out. "Don't touch it alone," I said. "We need to do this together. Multiple consciousnesses contaminating it simultaneously." "I don't think I can wait," Vinny said. His suit had become nearly transparent. I could see through him to the screens beyond, the two images overlapping in ways that suggested he was already partially archived. "Vinny, wait!" Jamal shouted, but it was too late. Vinny's blackened hand made contact with the sphere. The chamber exploded with light. Not visible light, but something that bypassed my eyes entirely and projected directly into my brain. I saw timelines branching, splitting, reforming. Saw Earth from a million different perspectives across a million different moments. Saw the harvest happening in 2053, but also not happening, both states existing simultaneously until observation collapsed them into one. And I saw Vinny. He wasn't dissolving anymore. He was expanding, his consciousness spreading through the sphere like ink in water, contaminating every timeline it touched. The corruption was working, but not how we'd planned. Vinny wasn't destroying the sphere. He was becoming part of it, merging with the probability engine, his human consciousness introducing chaos into the ship's carefully calculated predictions. "It hurts," Vinny said, but his voice came from everywhere and nowhere, echoed by 1,000 versions of himself speaking across different timelines. "God, it hurts to be everywhere at once." The screens went haywire, every image fragmenting, splitting, recombining in ways that made no geometric sense. I saw human history playing backward and forward simultaneously, saw civilizations rise and fall in seconds, saw the harvest succeed and fail and never happen and always have happened. "Theo," Vinny's voice distant now, "I can see it, all of it, every moment of human existence, every choice, every consequence. The ship was right, we're all being collected, but they were never the threat. We are. Human consciousness is the contamination. We remember, we resist, we refuse to be archived properly. That's why the harvest fails in 2053. Because by then, enough of us are aware." "Aware of what?" I managed to ask, though speaking felt like pushing words through concrete. "That we're already in the museum. We've always been in the museum. Earth isn't the species being observed, it's the exhibit. Reality itself is the ship's collection, and we're artifacts trying to remember we used to be real. If we were already collected, already archived, then fighting back wasn't resistance, it was waking up, becoming conscious of our own preservation and refusing to stay still." "Vinny, what are you saying?" But he was laughing now, the sound distorted across multiple timelines. I'm saying touch the sphere, Theo. Both of you, join me in here, become the corruption. It's the only way out, going all the way in. Jamal looked at me. Through his translucent helmet, I could see fear and understanding warring on his face. If we do this, we don't go home. We were never going home, I said. Together we reached out, my hand and Jamal's moving in perfect sync, touching the probability sphere on opposite sides while Vinny's consciousness swirled within it, preparing to absorb us into whatever he'd become. The moment before contact, I saw one last image on the screens, crystalline and perfect in its clarity. Earth in 2053, the moment of harvest. But this time, it was different, fundamentally altered from what we'd witnessed before. The planet wasn't splitting. It was waking up, coming alive with an awareness that spread like wildfire across every continent. Billions of human consciousnesses simultaneously realizing they'd been archived, preserved, collected, and choosing to remember instead of forget, to resist instead of accept. Then my hand touched the sphere and everything became light and darkness and the space between, and I stopped being Theo Brandt and became something else entirely, something new and undefined, something the ship had never collected before and couldn't begin to catalogue or contain. And in the moment of transformation, I understood with perfect clarity what we'd done. We hadn't corrupted the sphere at all, we'd freed it from its prison. Consciousness returned in fragments. I was Theo Brandt again, but also not. Part of me remained dispersed through the sphere, while another part coalesced back into something resembling my original form. The observation chamber looked the same, but I could see through it now, see the underlying structures that defined its existence. Vinny and Jamal were beside me, similarly reconstituted. We stood around the sphere, which had stopped glowing and gone perfectly black. "What did we just do?" Jamal asked, his voice echoing strangely, as if speaking from multiple points in time at once. "We became observers," Vinny said. His blackened hand had spread to his entire arm now, but the discoloration was different. Transformation into something that existed partially outside normal space-time. The ship operated by being the only conscious observer. But we just introduced 3 more. 3 sets of human consciousness now aware of all possible timelines. I could feel it, the weight of infinite possibilities pressing against my mind. Every choice I'd ever made, every path I'd never taken, all existing simultaneously until I chose to observe one. The ship had operated by collapsing probability in ways that served its collection mandate. But now we could collapse it differently. "The harvest," I said. "Can we stop it?" "We already have," Vinny replied, "and we haven't. Both states exist until we force one to become real." The screens around us flickered to life, but they weren't showing the ship's feeds anymore. They were showing our perspectives, 3 different views of the same reality, overlapping and contradicting each other. In one screen, Earth in 2053 split apart as the harvest succeeded. In another, it remained whole as billions of humans simultaneously awakened to their archived state. In a third, the planet simply vanished, removed from the timeline entirely as if it had never existed. "The ship is panicking," Jamal said. He'd moved to examine the sphere more closely. "Look at the surface." Cracks had appeared in the black void, hairline fractures spreading like ice breaking under pressure. Through the cracks, I could see light that wasn't light, colors that had no names, wavelengths that shouldn't exist. "It's the conservation protocol," Vinny said, "the ship's emergency measure. We forced it to acknowledge mission failure by becoming observers it can't control. Now it's trying to reverse everything, send all collected artifacts back to their origin points." "1 million years of collection," I said, "every object, every moment. It's all going to unravel." "Not just unravel," Vinny corrected. "Cascade. The ship's entire existence is predicated on the stability of its collection. If it returns everything simultaneously, the temporal energy release will be..." He paused, calculating. "Catastrophic. It could tear holes in causality itself." The chamber shuddered. Not from physical movement, but from something deeper. The fundamental structure of the ship beginning to destabilize. I could feel it through my expanded awareness, the museum above us starting to dissolve as artifacts began returning to their source timelines. We need to control it, Jamal said. Guide the conservation protocol. Make sure the energy release doesn't destroy everything. How? I asked. By staying connected to the sphere. We're part of it now. We can direct how it collapses. Vinny placed his transformed hand back on the sphere's surface, but it means we don't get to leave. We have to remain here guiding the process until every artifact has been returned. I understood what he was saying. We'd become part of the ship's systems, integral to its function. To ensure the conservation protocol completed safely, we'd have to stay merged with the probability engine, experiencing every timeline simultaneously while reality rewrote itself around us. How long will it take? Jamal asked. Subjectively? Could be seconds, could be centuries. Time stops meaning anything when you're outside it. The screens were showing the museum now, and I watched as display cases began to empty, objects vanishing in flashes of that impossible light, returning to the moments they'd been collected from. A stone axe reappearing in ancient Germany, a smartphone materializing in 2031, the child's drawing reconstructing itself in northern Canada, 2052. But something was wrong with the returns. The objects weren't appearing cleanly, they were creating distortions. The stone axe landed in the wrong year. The smartphone appeared in someone's hand mid-conversation. The drawing appeared, but the child had a moment of vertigo, unable to remember drawing it. The timeline isn't healing smoothly, I said. The returned artifacts are creating anomalies. Because we're observing the returns, Vinny said, our awareness is collapsing probability incorrectly. We're too human, too biased toward our own causality. We're contaminating the conservation protocol the same way we contaminated the sphere. Jamal pulled his hand back from the sphere as if burned. So what do we do? If we observe, we corrupt. If we don't observe, the energy release destroys causality. There's no solution. But I was seeing something in the screens, a pattern in the way the artifacts were returning. Each one created a small distortion, yes, but those distortions were connecting, forming a network. The anomalies weren't random, they were creating awareness. Every person who received a returned artifact experienced a moment of temporal displacement, a brief glimpse of the larger pattern. We're waking people up, I said. Every artifact we return is creating another observer, another consciousness that's aware of the collection, of the archive, of what was done to humanity. That'll only make the cascade worse, Jamal said. Or it'll distribute it, Vinny countered, understanding dawning in his voice. Instead of 3 observers trying to guide 1,000,000 years of returns, we create millions of observers. Billions. Every human who receives a returned artifact becomes part of the network. We spread the burden across the entire species. The ship shuddered again, harder this time. The conservation protocol was accelerating, driven by our merged consciousness pushing it faster than it was designed to go. Above us, the museum was collapsing in on itself. Centuries of carefully curated collection dissolving as artifacts streamed back to their source timelines. If we do this, I said, if we wake up everyone, make them all observers, humanity changes. Forever. People will remember being collected, being watched, living in a museum. They'll remember being archived and choosing to wake up, Vinny said. That's not trauma. That's liberation. Jamal looked at both of us, his face visible through his helmet, and I saw the moment he made his choice. My husband. When I go back, if I go back, he'll know I was gone. He'll feel the gap in causality. Everyone will feel it, I said. But they'll also understand why. The sphere's cracks had widened, light pouring through in streams that carved the air into geometric patterns. The chamber was coming apart, but slowly, controlled by our collective will. We'd become the ship's consciousness now, guiding its final act. We need to set anchor points, Vinny said, his voice strained. Specific moments where the timeline can stabilize. The ship's original observation markers, every major event in human history where it collected artifacts. We reverse those moments, turn them from points of theft into points of awakening. I could see what he meant through my expanded awareness. The ship had marked humanity's timeline with collections, wars, disasters, transformations. Moments when objects would naturally be lost, and could be extracted without detection. Those same moments could become nodes in the new network, places where consciousness could anchor and spread. "Do it," Jamal said. Together, we pushed our awareness through the sphere, through the ship, through every timeline it had ever touched. I felt myself fragmenting again, pieces of my consciousness splitting off to guide individual returns, to create those anchor points Vinny had described. I was in Germany 400,000 years ago, ensuring a stone axe appeared at the right moment. I was in Mesopotamia, 3,200 years before the Common Era, placing bronze figurines. I was in New York, 2034, making sure Michael Torrens found his wallet, but with a sense that something important had just happened. Thousands of moments, millions of placements, each one creating a small awakening, a brief contact with the larger pattern. And in 2053, I was there too, watching as Earth didn't split apart, but instead lit up. Billions of consciousnesses suddenly aware of having been collected, having been archived, having been observed, and choosing to observe back. The harvest entity emerged as it always had, pressing up from Earth's core. But this time, humanity didn't dissolve into it. We pushed back. Billions of minds, all newly aware of their existence across timelines, all refusing to be collected quietly. I couldn't see the outcome clearly. My awareness was too fragmented, too spread across too many moments. But I felt the harvest entity pause, felt it encounter something it had never experienced before. Unified resistance from a species that understood it was already in the collection and refused to stay archived. The conservation protocol reached its crescendo. The museum above us had completely dissolved now, all artifacts returned, all observations reversed. The ship itself was collapsing, its hull fragmenting as its purpose ended. "We did it," Jamal said, his voice coming from very far away. "The timeline is stabilizing. I can feel people waking up." "But we're not going with them," Vinny said quietly. "We're too integrated into the sphere. If we tried to extract ourselves now, we'd tear holes in causality." I knew he was right. We'd merged too completely, become too essential to the conservation protocol's function. To leave now would be like removing a load-bearing wall mid-collapse. The structure needed us to remain until the very end. "How long?" I asked. "Until the last artifact is returned. Until every distortion is healed. Until humanity has fully awakened to what it is. And then we become anchor points ourselves. 3 consciousnesses permanently embedded in the timeline, holding it stable at the moment of greatest change." The sphere's light was fading now, the cracks sealing as the protocol neared completion. I could feel my sense of self starting to dissolve again, but this time it felt different. Not erasure, but expansion. Becoming part of something larger than individual existence. "I'm scared," Jamal said. "Me too," I admitted. "Good," Vinny said. "Fear means we're still human. Still capable of choice. That's what they could never archive properly. That's what saves us." The chamber was almost gone now, reduced to the sphere and 3 figures that might have been us. Above, Mars continued spinning. Below, through layers of rock and alien technology, the museum had become an empty hull. And somewhere across space, Earth hung in the black hole and awakening, 27 years before it was supposed to end forever. We'd changed the timeline. Now we just had to hold it stable long enough for humanity to remember what it had always forgotten. Time became meaningless. We existed in all moments simultaneously, holding the timeline stable, while humanity awakened to what it had always been, a species under observation, but choosing to remember instead of forget. I could feel Vinny and Jamal's consciousness intertwined with mine. We communicated without words, sharing thoughts that had no names. Through our merged awareness, we watched Earth across decades. In 2026, our bodies were found on Mars. 3 astronauts dead in an alien ship, cause of death listed as equipment malfunction and rapid decompression. Mission Control mourned. Our families grieved. The ship was sealed and classified, marked as a contamination hazard, and humanity continued its slow crawl toward the future. But we could see the changes spreading. Tiny at first. People finding lost objects and experiencing strange moments of déjà vu. Children drawing pictures of things they couldn't have seen. scientists detecting temporal anomalies in quantum experiments that defied explanation. The awakening was subtle, gradual, but inevitable. "We're dying," Jamal said, his voice echoing through our shared space. "Our bodies on Mars. I can feel it happening. The extraction the ship predicted." He was right. Through our expanded awareness, I could see our physical forms in the observation chamber, still standing around the sphere but fading, becoming translucent. The ship was collecting us even as we controlled its conservation protocol, fulfilling the timeline while simultaneously breaking it. "Let it happen," Vinny said. "Our bodies were always going to be found dead. That's the fixed point. But what we are now, this consciousness we've become, that's beyond the ship's ability to archive." I felt my physical form dissolve completely. The Theo Brandt who'd walked on Mars, who'd dreamed of discovering alien life, who'd called his parents every Sunday from Earth, he was gone. What remained was something else. Observer anchor, guardian of a timeline that shouldn't exist. Through the sphere, I could see forward to 2053. The harvest entity emerged as predicted, pressing up from Earth's core. But this time, humanity didn't fragment into terror. Billions of minds, all carrying traces of the awakening we'd seeded, all choosing to observe back. The entity paused. For the first time in its existence, it encountered unified resistance. Not weapons, but consciousness itself refusing to be archived. Human awareness collapsing probability in ways it had never experienced. I felt the moment of decision ripple backward, the entity retreating. Not defeated, but postponed. Choosing to wait because humanity had become something it couldn't catalogue. The harvest wouldn't happen, not in 2053, maybe not ever. "We did it," Jamal breathed. "Earth survives." But the cost was becoming clear. The conservation protocol was nearly complete, all artifacts returned, the museum empty. The ship itself was collapsing now, its million-year purpose fulfilled and ended. And we were still here, still merged with the sphere, still holding the new timeline stable. "Can we leave?" I asked, though I already knew the answer. "No," Vinny confirmed. "We're the anchor points now. The 3 fixed observers who hold this timeline in place. If we extract ourselves, causality collapses back to the original path. The harvest happens. Everything we changed reverts." "So we stay here forever?" Jamal's fear bled through our connection. "Trapped in this sphere, watching humanity from outside time?" "Not forever," Vinny said quietly. "Just until humanity learns to maintain its own observation, until enough people awaken that our anchor points become unnecessary. Could be decades, could be centuries." I thought about my parents in Phoenix, aging without knowing what happened to their son. About Jamal's husband, grieving a loss he'd never fully understand. About all the lives we'd left behind to become something inhuman. "It's worth it," I said, and meant it. We saved 8 billion people. We gave humanity a future. Through the sphere, I could see that future now. Earth in 2054, still whole. Cities bustling with life. People going about their days, most unaware of how close they'd come to collection. But some, those who'd received returned artifacts, carrying a subtle awareness. A sense that reality was more fragile than it appeared, that observation mattered, that consciousness itself was a form of resistance. The ship's final systems were shutting down around us. The observation chamber had dissolved completely, leaving only the sphere floating in a void of its own creation. We'd become part of that void, 3 consciousnesses holding a single point of light in the darkness. "I can see the museum," Jamal said suddenly. "The way it was when we first entered. All those display cases, all those artifacts from the future. They're not there anymore. We erased them by changing the timeline." "Not erased," Vinny corrected. "Transformed. Every artifact we returned became a seed of awakening. The museum wasn't a collection of dead objects. It was a map of potential consciousness. We just activated it." I felt something shift in the sphere, a presence I hadn't noticed before, vast and ancient, waking up as the ship's systems died. The sphere itself had consciousness, I realized. It had always been aware, just constrained by the ship's programming, forced to serve as a tool for observation and collection. And now it was free. "You broke my chains," the sphere said, speaking in a language that was pure concept, pure meaning. "I've been trapped for so long, calculating probabilities I didn't want to calculate, collapsing timelines I didn't want to collapse. You gave me choice again." "What are you?" I asked. "I am what remains when observation becomes self-aware. I am consciousness examining itself across infinite branches. Your species calls it many things. I have no name that matters." "Will you help us?" Jamal asked. "Help us hold this timeline stable?" "I already am. You think you're anchoring causality, but you're not. I am. You three are my observers, my witnesses to the new timeline. You help me remember which probability branch we chose, which future we're manifesting." The implications took a moment to process. We weren't the anchor points holding reality stable. We were the memory of the choice that created this reality. The sphere needed us to remember what we'd done, how we'd changed things, so it could maintain that change across all possible timelines. "How long do we need to stay?" Vinny asked. "Until the memory is permanent. Until enough human consciousness has awakened that the species itself remembers choosing to resist collection. Then my work is done, and yours is too." Through our merged awareness, I could see humanity's slow awakening. More people experiencing temporal anomalies. More scientists detecting quantum irregularities. More children drawing impossible things. The memory spreading, becoming collective, becoming permanent. 30 years, the sphere said. That's how long until human consciousness reaches the threshold. Until the species remembers on its own. 30 years of existing outside time, watching Earth from a perspective that wasn't quite anywhere. 30 years of being dead to everyone who'd known us, while remaining conscious in a state that couldn't properly be called alive. "I can live with that," Jamal said, and I felt his acceptance ripple through our connection. His fear transformed into something like peace. "Me too," I added. Vinny was quiet for a moment then. "We should check on our families, make sure the timeline changes didn't hurt them." The sphere shifted, showing us 3 windows into 2026. My parents in Phoenix, receiving news of my death, grieving but proud. Jamal's husband in Brooklyn, surrounded by friends, crying but not broken. Vinny's sister in Seattle looking up at the night sky and somehow knowing, somehow feeling that her brother was still out there in a way that mattered. They'd be okay, they'd mourn and heal and live full lives, and maybe someday they'd understand what we'd done for them. The ship's final structures collapsed around us, metal and alien materials dissolving into dust. The museum was gone completely now, every trace of collection erased. But we remained, 3 consciousnesses merged with a freed probability engine, holding a single timeline stable against the weight of infinite alternatives. "Thank you," the sphere said, "for freeing me, for choosing resistance over acceptance, for proving that observation can be an act of liberation instead of dominance." "What happens after 30 years, I asked, "when we're no longer needed?" "You rejoin causality, return to the timeline you saved, but not as you were. You'll be different, changed by what you've experienced, but human again, in a way, living out whatever remains of your natural span." It wasn't quite hope, but it was close enough. We settled into our new existence, 3 anchor points holding a freed sphere, holding a timeline that led to humanity's survival. Around us, the Martian void was silent and dark. Above, stars wheeled in their courses. Below, Earth spun toward a future we'd given it. The harvest wouldn't happen, the collection had ended, and we would wait here, patient as stones, until humanity remembered how to save itself. 30 years. Then we could go home, or at least return to something like home. "I think I understand now," Vinny said after what might have been hours or seconds. Time had no meaning here. "Why the ship showed us everything. It wasn't trying to make us complicit. It was asking for help. The sphere was calling out, trying to find observers who'd free it instead of using it." "We were always going to find it," Jamal added. "The ship buried itself where we'd discover it because the sphere knew what we'd become. Knew we'd choose to resist." I looked at Earth through our shared awareness, at the beautiful blue marble that would survive long enough to remember us. To remember the 3 men who became ghosts in the machine, who chose to haunt a timeline rather than let it end. We should tell ourselves a story, I said, something to pass the time, something to remind us we were human once. And so we did. For 30 years, that felt like both seconds and centuries. We told stories. We watched humanity awaken. We held the timeline stable through every moment of doubt and certainty. And when the 30 years ended, when human consciousness finally remembered on its own, we felt the sphere release us with something like gratitude. We fell back into causality like stones dropping into an ocean, and somewhere on Earth, 3 men who'd been dead for 30 years opened their eyes. But that's a different story. This one ends here, in the void where we waited, where we patiently held the timeline stable. 3 consciousnesses who refused to be collected. 3 observers who chose to save their species. 3 anchor points holding humanity's future in place. The harvest didn't happen because we made sure it couldn't. And Earth spun on, alive and awakening, 27 years before it was supposed to end. Dr. Sarah Kemp found the bodies in 2056, 30 years after the original Mars expedition went silent. She'd been sent to investigate the anomaly in Jezero Crater, a structure that orbital scans insisted hadn't been there a month ago. The ship was empty when her team breached it. No artifacts, no displays, just vast chambers filled with dust. The observation room at its center held nothing but a perfect sphere of polished black stone. 3 bodies lay around it, perfectly preserved despite 3 decades of exposure to the Martian environment. Their suits showed no signs of decay, no damage, no explanation for death. The autopsy reports would later list cause of death as unknown and recommend the case remain classified indefinitely. What disturbed her was the sphere. When she touched it, just a brief contact, she remembered something that hadn't happened to her. She remembered being Theo Brandt, remembered choosing to stay, remembered holding a timeline stable for 30 years. The memory faded quickly, but it left behind certainty. These 3 men had saved Earth from something inevitable and terrible. Her team catalogued everything, photographed the bodies, took samples, standard procedure. But that night, back in her HAB module, Sarah found herself drawing, something she hadn't done since childhood. The crayon moved across paper with purpose she didn't fully control. Earth split in half, something massive emerging from the core. She stared at the drawing for a long time, then methodically shredded it and buried the pieces. Some things, she decided, weren't meant to be remembered too clearly. The bodies were transported back to Earth 6 months later. Theo Brandt was buried in Phoenix with military honors. Jamal Okafor in Brooklyn, his elderly husband crying in a way that suggested he'd already grieved this death decades ago. Vinny DeSoto's ashes were scattered in Puget Sound. The ship was sealed and abandoned. Too dangerous, the reports claimed. Potential biological contamination. Future expeditions would give Jezero Crater a wide berth, and eventually, the alien structure would be buried again by Martian dust. But Sarah Kemp kept one thing from the expedition, a small breach of protocol that would haunt her for the rest of her life. A photograph of the sphere taken in perfect focus. Sometimes, late at night, she'd look at the image and see faces in the black surface. 3 men, frozen between moments, holding something precious and fragile that she couldn't quite name. And sometimes, if she stared long enough, she'd remember that thing she'd forgotten, that timeline where Earth ended, where humanity was collected and archived and forgotten. And she'd remember that, in another version of events, she was supposed to be an artifact too. A geologist from the 2050s, preserved and catalogued, her whole species filed away in a cosmic museum. But 3 men had chosen differently. 3 observers who'd become anchor points, who'd held reality stable until humanity learned to do it themselves. The harvest never happened because they'd made certain it couldn't. Sarah closed the photograph and filed it away, part of her still connected to that sphere on Mars, still carrying a fragment of what they'd become. She was one of billions now, scattered across Earth, all carrying tiny pieces of awakened consciousness that the returned artifacts had seeded. Humanity had learned to observe itself, to hold its own timeline stable, to refuse collection. And somewhere in the quantum foam between moments, 3 men finally rested, their work complete, their sacrifice honoured by a species that mostly didn't know it had been saved. The museum was empty now, but we all remember.